Right now, somewhere in Kenya, a herd of elephants is standing still, not grazing, not moving, just standing over the bones of one of their own who died here months ago. They've passed this spot before, and every single time they slow down. They reach out with their trunks and touch the bones. They linger for minutes, sometimes longer, before finally walking away. Scientists have a name for this. They call it object investigation near the dead, which is a very clinical way of saying elephants keep coming back to visit their dead. And nobody has a clean explanation for why. Because explaining it means answering a question we've been quietly avoiding for a long time. Does that elephant know something is gone? Does it understand on some level that what it's touching used to be alive? Does it know that it's alive? That sounds like a question for a philosophy class. But over the last 50 years, science has gotten closer to answering it than anyone expected. And what it found is uncomfortable. In 1970, a psychologist named Gordon Gallup Jr. designed what is still considered the gold standard test for self-awareness in animals. It's called the mirror test. While the animal is unconscious, you place a small mark somewhere on its body, a dot of dye on its forehead, a sticker behind its ear, somewhere it can only see in a mirror, not by looking down. Then you put it in front of a mirror and watch what happens. Most animals react the same way. They see another animal. They posture, they growl, they try to intimidate it. Some lose interest after a minute. Some keep threatening the reflection for hours. Not one of them ever realizes it's threatening itself. But then there are the others. They see the mark. They look at the mirror. They look back at themselves. And they reach up and touch the mark on their own body. They understood. The reflection is them. The animals that pass, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, gorillas, but only occasionally, dolphins, killer whales, elephants, and one bird, the Eurasian magpie, a creature the size of a pigeon with a brain no bigger than a walnut that looks into a mirror and recognizes itself. The animals that fail, dogs, cats, almost every other mammal on Earth. And this is where it gets strange, human babies for the first 2 years of their lives. But here's the problem. A lot of scientists think the mirror test is a terrible way to measure self-awareness. Here's why. Dogs don't live in a world built on vision. They live in a world built on smell. Asking a dog to recognize itself in a mirror is roughly like asking you to identify yourself from a recording of your own heartbeat. The format of the test is wrong, not the dog. In 2017, a researcher named Alexandra Horowitz at Barnard College redesigned the experiment. Instead of a mirror, she used scent. A dog's own urine, altered urine, and completely foreign urine, and she watched which one each dog spent the most time investigating. Dogs spent significantly more time with the altered version of their own scent. They noticed. Something about them had changed, and they registered it. By their own rules, inside their own sensory world, dogs may know exactly who they are, but knowing who you are is different from knowing that you are. Philosophers have been arguing about this distinction for centuries. There's a difference between being a self and knowing you're a self, between having experiences and knowing that you have them. There's a word for it, metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Being aware of your own awareness. It's what you're doing right now, actually. You're not just reading these words. You know that you're reading them. You can step outside your own head and observe yourself from a distance. That ability to watch yourself think is what we assumed made us unique. The question is whether animals can do the same thing. And the answer, increasingly, is yes. But it's messier than anyone expected. In 2007, researchers at the University of Georgia ran a study on rhesus monkeys. They gave the monkeys a memory test and after each question offered them a choice. attempt a harder version worth more points, or take an easy version worth fewer. The monkeys consistently chose harder questions when they felt confident. They chose easier ones when they were unsure. They weren't just answering questions. They were evaluating how well they knew the answer before they gave it. That's metacognition. That's an animal thinking about its own thinking. And it doesn't stop at monkeys. Rats have been shown to opt out of tests they haven't studied for, choosing a small, guaranteed reward over gambling on a question they're uncertain about. Pigeons can report their own memory failures. Dolphins have been observed hesitating before answering in a way that precisely mirrors human uncertainty. These animals aren't just reacting to the world. They're modeling their own internal states. They know when they know something, and they know when they don't. But here's what science still cannot crack. All of that, the mirror recognition, the metacognition, the self-modeling, it's all behavioral. We can watch what animals do. We cannot get inside what they feel. There's a concept philosophers call qualia, the raw subjective texture of experience, the specific redness of red, the particular sting of a paper cut, the feeling of being you, right now in this exact moment. Is there something it feels like to be a dog? Or is the dog simply running biological software, processing inputs, producing outputs, with nobody home? The philosopher Thomas Nagel made this question famous in a 1974 paper with one of the greatest titles in academic history. What is it like to be a bat? His argument was simple and devastating. Bats navigate using echolocation. They experience the world as a landscape of sound reflections that we literally cannot imagine. And no matter how much we study bat brains and bat behavior, we will never know what it actually feels like to be one. The inner experience is inaccessible. And if we can't know what it's like to be a bat, how do we know there's anything it's like to be anything other than us? Some scientists think we've been getting this catastrophically wrong. In 2012, a group of neuroscientists gathered at Cambridge University and signed what became known as the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. Their conclusion was direct. The neurological structures that generate consciousness in humans are not unique to humans. Birds and mammals, and possibly other creatures, possess the same neural substrates for conscious states. In plain English, the hardware that runs consciousness in your brain exists in their brains too. The lights, they argued, are probably on. Frans de Waal, one of the world's leading primatologists, spent decades watching chimpanzees up close. He argued that the question of whether animals have inner lives was framed backwards. We should be shocked, he said, if they didn't. Evolution doesn't tend to invent something from scratch. Consciousness almost certainly evolved gradually, just like legs, just like eyes, just like lungs. Which means it probably exists on a spectrum. And we are not at one end of that spectrum with everything else at the other. We are all somewhere along the same line. And then there's the one piece of evidence that's hardest to reason your way out of: grief. In 2018, a killer whale named Tahlequah lost her calf. The baby died shortly after birth, and for 17 days, Tahlequah carried the body of her dead calf on her head as she swam through the open ocean. 17 days, over 1,000 miles. The rest of her pod took turns helping her carry the body when she grew tired. Scientists called it a tour of grief, the longest documented in any non-human species. And no one had a clean behavioral explanation for it. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't about feeding. There is no evolutionary advantage to carrying a dead body across open ocean for 2 weeks straight. Except maybe this one. Maybe she knew her calf was gone and couldn't let go. If that's not the behavior of a creature that understands something existed and now doesn't, then what is it? So where does that leave us? The science says yes, some animals can recognize themselves. Yes, they can think about their own thinking. Yes, they feel something, probably. But the deepest question, the one you actually want answered, we still can't fully reach. Does the elephant standing over those bones know that it exists? We can't prove it yet. What we do know is this: the more closely we look at animals, the smaller the gap becomes. Every decade of research closes the distance a little more. Abilities we once believed were exclusively human, language, tool use, culture, mourning, self-recognition, keep appearing in other species, one after another. The wall between us and them has been getting shorter for as long as we've been studying them. And that raises a question we've been avoiding. If we've been wrong this whole time, if animals exist in some meaningful sense, if there's something it's like to be them, if they feel and grieve and know themselves, then the way we treat them isn't just an ethical question. It's something we've been getting wrong for all of human history. And the only reason we got away with it this long is because we couldn't ask them. There was a chimpanzee named Washoe who in 1966 became the first non-human animal to learn American Sign Language. She learned over 350 signs. She taught some of them to her son on her own without being prompted by researchers. One day, a researcher who had been away for several months came back to visit. When Washoe saw her, she looked at her carefully. Then she signed one word: cry. Then she pointed at the researcher's eyes. Cry. She wanted to know why the researcher wasn't crying, why she wasn't as moved as Washoe was. Whether or not Washoe understood her own existence, we don't know. But she understood yours. Maybe that's where it starts.